Academy Award-winning artist and production designer, Doug J. So please, give it up for three-time Oscar winner, Guillermo del Toro! Please welcome for the first time ever at Comic-Con, give it up for the one, the only, George Lucas! Each one of them helps us pass on a belief system. You look at cave art and you immediately get the message. We hunt, we gather food, we must work together to survive.
Well, I've been collecting art since I was in college, and back when I was in college, which is sort of near the Stone Age, the idea is that I couldn't really afford real art. I love all art, no matter what it is. But I could afford comic art because in those days it was underground, and it was, you sort of had to know people to get, find out whether there was a sort of a auction that was sent out on a mimeograph sheet and had some prices and names of art. And so I've been sort of collecting narrative art ever since then, because I could then, in college, I could get an alley-oop for $30. And because the comics were expensive, but the original art wasn't that expensive because it was harder to come by.
But you managed to collect upwards of 40,000 pieces of art.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 50 years now. And then it occurred to me that what am I going to do with it all? Because I refuse to sell it. You know, I'm not one of the typical high art collectors who buys and then you come back 5 years later and you say, what happened to that painting you bought? That was so beautiful. Well, I sold it for $10 million. I made a lot of money on it. I said, I could never do that. It just is not what I think art is. I think it's more about a connection, an emotional connection with the work, not how much it cost or what celebrity did it or whatever. It's more a personal thing. And I don't think it's anything that anybody else can tell you. That's art, that's not art. It doesn't work that way. If you have an emotional connection, then it's art. If you don't, then just move on to the next painting. And it's the idea that people can tell you what art is and talk about it. I've discovered just from my experience of making movies and things that, other people's opinions don't mean much. The only thing that really means something is what you do and what you feel about it. And then if you see that other people react to it in a very emotional way, then you say, well, I did my job, that was good. But when people come who say they're experts and they say, oh, that's not art, that's not this, that's tough. And I've worked with hundreds of illustrators in my life, and they're all brilliant, they're all great, but they don't get recognized for anything. So this is sort of a temple to the people's art.
Temple to the people's art. Guillermo, you have some...
To hint at the mystery and provide eloquence and emotion. And I think that when you have those two things and you realize that there is, once photography enters the picture, a lot of the art that is figurative starts to be looked, frowned upon a lot more historically. And yet you realize that it is an art that captures a moment and an emotion for many, many people, that is always able to express things that are not just propaganda once it's liberated from church and state, and before or at the same time than movies and so forth. And you have graffiti, you have many of the popular mimeographed forms of art that do that. They are not dominated, and the museum, what is important for me, or what is magical, is not a man and his collection, it's a lineage of images. A lineage of images that have been spoken, and we as storytellers and visual storytellers, we have that vocabulary to see where that thing came from, the etymology of that image. And when you think about that, you know, Noam Chomsky said, the limit of your language is the limit of your universe. If you cannot name something, you cannot own it. The same is true for images. And what is amazing about this collection, it will give you step by step how a form of expression came to inform what we are today. Because we are in a critical moment in which one of the things they like to disappear is the past. You know, and this is memorializing a popular, vociferous, expressive, and eloquent moment in our visual past that belongs to all of us, and the museum celebrates this.
Thank you so much. I mean, I feel so incredibly honored to be here to celebrate narrative art. What's amazing, and I haven't shared this before, but I grew up loving comic books, and that's how I fell in love with art. And it's one of those things where it was surprising, because growing up as a kid in Michigan, you know, art, narrative art, comic book art, magazine illustrations were kind of looked down upon, and it was kind of sad. But it was a way for me to enjoy art, and it invited me to discover more about art. And what I love about what George and Melody are doing in creating this museum is that it's celebrating and acknowledging and giving respect to an art form that has really, you know, haven't been highlighted before. I mean, I think it's really time to celebrate the artists who have, you know, committed their whole careers to creating this, because it is really hard. And what's terrific for me is that, you know, as an aspiring artist when I was young, I wanted to draw. And this gave me a portal into this world to discover more about it. And what's wonderful about the museum is that it describes all the variety of forms of narrative art. You have Charles Schultz's Peanuts, you have Winsor McKay, you have heavy metal magazines, then you have Norman Rockwell and Frank Frazetta and Mobius. Those are all different avenues for a kid to enjoy art and to entice them to come in. One of the things that I found kind of sad, though, was that, you know, when I was growing up, art, comic book art wasn't taken seriously. It was always diminished. It was kind of like, okay, Doug, you'll outgrow that someday. And I'm so glad I didn't. It opened up a whole world of people behind the scenes creating the art that I loved growing up. And this was never really exposed to me before. And that's why I think, you know, the museum is going to highlight a good portion of that. But what it did was it allowed me to start learning about art. I didn't go to art school, I'm self-taught, but I started to really find as many magazines as possible, and I honed my craft as best as I could. And I thought I was pretty competent, but then I started working with George. Honestly, that's when I realized I know nothing about design and art, narrative design and art. I know about industrial design, I could do product designs, I could do cool spaceships, but that's not what narrative art is. Narrative art is driven by story. Story comes first, the art comes second. And it was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, because as you'll see in some of my early art on the prequels, they weren't very successful because I was designing in isolation without context, you know, and part of it was because I didn't know what the story was. But the designs were always kind of presented as, you know, okay, like these are kind of individual items. And I was forgetting about the connection of how those designs fit into the overall picture of the story. Later on, you'll see that I slowly started to evolve because I started to take lessons from George, where I learned, no, those designs need history, they need context, and they need to fit within the scenes. So I started to present designs within the context of a scene. I started to invent the scenes to try to see and validate the designs. And it's one of those things that I learned from George, where cinematic narrative design is very specific. It's story driven.
illustrates that story. And that's the right hand of building a community is you need the art to make it seem real. Even, you know, back in the whether it's the Renaissance or the Stone Age, you'll always have a story that people believe. It's mythology. It's not really true, but people believe it, and it binds them together with a common belief system. That common belief system is what is really important. And what we're doing here with the museum is to try to make people aware of the mythology that we live by, and at the same time, let them have an emotional experience looking at art that does tell the modern mythology. And as Doug pointed out, it's more of an exact science than people think it is. And it's a way, the art part of it, is a way of making it really accessible to people and make it so they believe it.
The connection that I always hear, that I've constantly heard in just our various conversations, is emotion.
Yes.
An emotional connection that the art, evokes an emotion from you.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the most important things to never forget. I think when people step into this museum, they will be emotionally affected by it. They won't even have to get inside of it before they have an emotional connection to it, because it's just absolutely stunningly beautiful and intriguing, done differently than anything I've ever seen. But once they get inside, the things that they see, they will have an emotional connection to me personally. And which to me, I think will endear everyone in this audience. So please make it your business to get to Los Angeles to check out this Museum of Narrative Art. Flash Gordon from 1934. Original, as in you can see the smudges by all the hands that touched it on the way to getting produced. Never been on display before anywhere, ever. Original sketches from the Peanuts comics from the 50s and 60s. Ooh, my Charlie Brown? My Snoopy? What? Did y'all not love Lucy kicking the football? Exactly. Come on, the Great Pumpkin. But Sally sat in there all that time. We can go on this. Check this out. Drawn on board with graphite with little text taped to the top and editorial notes written on the side. This is amazing. Original drawings from Iron Man's first cover in 1968. Wow. And an original pen and ink splash of Black Panther from 1968.
Well, again, one of the things that we deal with is the history of illustration, because this really is about illustration and about the mythology that creates the stories, and the orators who, like in Greece, were highly respected above everybody because the stories were so important. And these are the things that we believe in. Some people believe in science, but science is an opinion. It's not real any more than stories are real. But the idea of the common mythology that we believe in today, like love and community, and all of it, we've got like 33, 40 different galleries, and those galleries all are illustrations of a particular mythology that we live with today. Whether it's love, whether it's work, these are all not real, but it's an idea that gives us a common belief system. And in a common belief system, you can't build anything. You can't build pyramids, you can't build palaces, you can't build airplanes, you can't do anything by yourself. You have to have people you can do it with. And one of the issues, ultimately, one is family, is that I believe, and I think most people believe, that most families are dysfunctional. You always have somebody in there who, okay, we'll kind of live with him a little bit, or her. But the thing about the Rockwell painting that she's talking about is that it's a group of paintings are called the Four Freedoms. One of them is the freedom from want. And what it is a painting of mom bringing in a turkey and everybody's sitting around the table all smiles and looking and everything. The idea that Uncle Jim is drunk over the quarter, or Sally and Billy are going to get divorced because they're having a huge argument, all that is not mentioned. But what it does say is the modern mythology is not that the Indians fed the pilgrims and saved them from starvation, because that would have gone away a long time ago. But it's really about is family. And people go to Thanksgiving and inevitably say, oh God, I don't want to do this again. It's going to be fights, it's going to be this, and I have to deal with my dad, I have to do, it's all kind of, oh, well, I guess I've got to. Well, you've got to, because that painting tells you that family is important. It's part of what we need to keep society together, even if it's tough. And that's, a lot of the art centers around those ideas of what we believe in and how important that is to us to have a community and to be able to build off of a common belief. And it's especially together today because of the fact that the world is becoming a smaller place. There are a lot of different common beliefs out there. It used to be easy because they were far away and it was hard to get to the, interact with that. But now we're experiencing, in a lot of ways, the fact that there's a lot of different beliefs and there's a lot that aren't common. And the society cannot exist without a common belief system. And that's where illustration is vital to show you what that means in everyday life.
Let's talk a little bit about the actual details of the museum, because I found this very curious, the attention to detail. There are no right angles in the entire museum. Everything in the museum is curved.
In my life, when I started out, I wanted to be an architect, and then I realized that it actually involves a lot of math. And I decided that wasn't such a good idea. So then I went to building cars and racing cars, and almost got killed. Decided that probably wasn't a good idea either. But then I went, and I didn't do that well in high school. So I decided, well, as I was in the hospital and recuperating from a car accident, I said, well, maybe I'll just go to junior college, and because this was during the Vietnam War, and there was a certain advantage to going to the college. So I went to college, and I liked social science. It was always very important to me. And so I decided I'd just take a lot of social science classes because it really was something I was interested in. And I got really hooked on anthropology and fell under the sway of he was actually more of an English teacher, but at the same time he was really a mythologist and somebody who really understood mythology, which I really was extremely interested in, and which really comes from a time when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my mom would put me to bed, and I asked her a question, and I said, Mom, if there's only one God, why are there so many different religions? And she really couldn't answer that. But I've spent the rest of my life trying to answer that. And I come to the conclusion that I believe in God, but I have no idea what God is. And I don't think anybody does, because that's the thing where a very, very human nature is that it is, when you're born, the baseline is fear. And as you go through life, you're curious about things, but you're especially curious about things you don't understand, and therefore that's a threat to you. And as a result, you make up stories to make it feel good. Well, you know, it goes dark periodically. Why does it? What happens if the sun does? I mean, if it doesn't get day, it's just night. What happens if, and back in the Greek times, they said, well, you got Apollo, he's a god, and he has a chariot that's on fire, and when it goes over, flies over, it's all daytime. Yeah. At night, it's dark. Oh, I feel better now. And it's true. It's stories that make you feel connected to other people, but it also gets rid of some of the problems you have about the fact that you have to know everything. And of course, one of the real problems we have is humans think they know everything, even though they don't know anything. You know, they're very, if you take the universe, we know so little about what's going on that it's just, we're like ants. We have no knowledge whatsoever. We just think we do. And that's one thing that this kind of art will celebrate in a way, because we have science fiction. Science fiction is a myth. We have made it real, but we've made it real because of science fiction books and art. And so that makes people say, oh, well, we could go to the moon. And once that idea is implanted, then we sort of believe we can do it. But the real problem is, I say, we think, well, we can go to the moon, we can go anywhere. No, I don't think so. Everything is in elements that are so huge, so vast, so impossible to understand for a human being, that you can't depend on what we know, and you can be inspired by what we think we know. Mm-hmm. But in the end,
Guillermo, you look like you want to get in there. What do you think?
Oh, I was, no, I think the shape of the museum for me, it is flow. And what is beautiful is that George is a collector, I'm a collector, but I know I don't own anything. I'm holding it briefly for the next person that is going to hold it or see it. Because we are not eternal. What we hold and what we cherish is. That art will live longer than any of us. And the flow of the museum is like a Mobius strip. It's telling you that. It's just telling you, look, this is for you. And then you're going to bring the next thing. And it's going to continue. And you can drink from the same fountains of knowledge and image and content and power and myth that George and many, many others have been part of. And that continuum and that generosity is what makes a big difference, that the shape reflects that. And I think it says, look, this belongs to you, carry it with you, and keep moving forward. And that's what this type of art says. It's not, this is where it ends, this is the all of all alls, and you should be puny, but this is for you. You hold it for a moment, and you pass it on. And that happened to me with the fires. Came so close to my collection, I said, I'm going to start moving some of the stuff out. I draw the line at 3 houses full of stuff. I got to be a little more. And now that this museum exists, a lot of it may go there, because it's beautiful to share, and that's why we are here. We are here. I said the other day, you are in this world to be a host or a guest. If you're a guest, you will never be happy. If you're a host, You will always be happy to serve, and this museum is hosting that type of art, and it's a continuum that belongs to all of us.